his spirit shot out of his chest. And the next thing I know, part of it went down the crown of my head and into my body, and the rest just flew out the window.
From NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing, this is The Howl. True stories, no notes. I'm Ethan Shanty. I don't know if what I'm about to do is a really good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's been a busy and long couple of weeks, and that's been punctuated by the death of my friend Derek Moss. He died a few weeks ago. He was 53 and left behind a wife and a 7-year-old, and of course left behind all of his friends here in the North Country and around the world. He was my professor at SUNY Potsdam and then became my friend. I was a young punk seeking guidance from an old punk, which Derek certainly was, having grown up at punk shows around the country and later spreading that ethos to kids in his classroom. I knew that Derek was going to die because he told me that his battle with myeloma was coming to an end. We almost never know when we're going to see a person for the last time, so it's hard to know what to do when you're aware that this visit is goodbye. You just try to act normal, I guess. So that day, that Saturday, we talked politics, we talked music. There were a few moments there where we cried, we hugged, and, I didn't stay long, truthfully, because I didn't feel like it was right to take up any more of his time that he could be spending with his family. Part of it, too, was that I couldn't get anything out of my mouth without crying, but I was able to say I love you, and I said thank you, and then I went out to the car to cry some more with my girlfriend. I've never really been good about expressing myself during those kind of moments. I couldn't even say anything at my dad's funeral, and truthfully, I hope that I don't have to learn how to galvanize myself against those kinds of things. The way that I process grief has always been through my art, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out later that I was very likely writing this poem about him when he died. So I wanted to read it here. I called it, I Hope You Find Your Way Back to Arkansas, which is where Derek was from originally. Here it goes. The room where you will stop breathing belies the severity of your cough, your fragile ribs, which you tell me to mind as we touch for the last time, your hand on my back for the first time. In fact, the room is as I remember when checking the roof for damage after a bad storm last year, when surveying the last written remains of our friend Maurice, when fawning over old punks and older novels. It all remains as vibrant and green in light of the summing up. I admit, though, there is an abundance of fresh blankets, new to me, piled high despite the lingering late summer heat. Much the same still, though not stale, the potted plants which are watered daily or weekly as needed, the same coffee cups and letters unopened, the same tumbled mess on the living room floor, your son's adventure paused while I visit you and discuss everything but the certainty of last breaths. I wonder if you can miss us and how you might stay, if only in your book, which somehow you found time to write from a hospital bed. There is as good a place as any to find inspiration. I think I'll remember you with longer hair, with earrings, my age, without end. Derek was an English professor, a lover of the written word. He was one of the first people to validate my writing in a really substantial way when he asked me for permission to teach one of my poems in his class. And I guess this poem is my way of honoring him, of saying thanks again in ways I couldn't properly express when he was here. Losing a loved one is hard. There's just no two ways about it. And when thinking about having to say goodbye to my friend Derek, I got thinking about this story from Mary Schlosser and her experience with her husband, his terminal illness, and their pact to communicate with one another after he was gone. So here's Mary Schlosser, live on stage at the Howl Grand Slam in 2019.
So it was the first week of my sophomore year in college, and it was a beautiful day. I remember the blue sky and looking up at the sky, and at the same time, I was walking into my dorm, and I collided with another student. And after we stepped back and recovered a bit, I looked up at him, and he was really good looking. And he looked down at me and said something cheesy like, "Whoa, what's your name?" And I managed to tell him my name and get his name. And then I stood there as he walked away, and I said something really cheesy to myself. I said, "I'm gonna marry that guy." So fast forward 5 years, and I married that guy. And we were enjoying our first year of marriage. Unfortunately, during that first year of marriage, we also found out that Mike was dealing with a terminal illness. So the doctors couldn't say when, they couldn't say how, but they were not optimistic. There was only so much they could do, and they would do whatever they could, but they encouraged us to make the most of our time together. So we did, and it was hard and wonderful at the same time. We had 15 years together. And Mike was mostly healthy. He did get sick at times, and he would recover. He outlived a lot of projections of how long he would live. And we made it through, and we made the most of those 15 years. Unfortunately, after those 15 years, Mike got sick. And this time, weeks went by, months went by, seasons went by, and he wasn't getting better. The illness was getting stronger, and Mike was getting weaker. So we had a conversation. And I asked him, if you go, when you go, could you please come back to me if you can and just let me know if you're okay? And he agreed, and we made that pact. So on the last day of Mike's life, as he was breathing his last breaths, I had one hand on his shoulder and one hand on his arm. And I stood there and watched him take his last breath. And right after that, his spirit shot out of his chest and swirled around the room and was just bouncing off the walls and was free. And the next thing I know, part of it went down the crown of my head and into my body, and the rest just flew out the window. And strangely enough, I didn't think that was weird. I thought that's what happened when someone dies. So I was so thankful because for the first time in so many months, Mike was no longer trapped in his body that was so racked with illness and pain. And I found myself actually smiling a bit and just so thankful. Little did I know that grief was waiting for me right around the corner. And for those of you that haven't experienced grief, for me, it was so deep and so wide and so incredibly painful. Everything hurt. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to sit, to stand, to eat, to drink, to talk to someone, to be quiet. That every day was just so long and hard to get through. And I found myself so thankful at the end of the day to sit down on my bed and have the opportunity to go to sleep, to forget a little while about what life looked like for me, to forget what we'd gone through, and to maybe pretend that life was the way it was before Mike died. So one night it occurred to me where I said to Mike, "Come to me in my dreams if you can, Mike." And so I experienced that he did. There were times where I had these beautiful dreams. He'd come, and it was just so peaceful, and he was not like he was here, but he was at peace and not in pain. And it helped me get through those long, dark days, knowing that I could escape into the dreams at night. And then I got an idea one night where I sat down and I said, "Mike, don't come to me in my dreams tonight. Take me to where you are." So I laid back in bed and I relaxed, and I remember laying on my back, peaceful, comfortable, closing my eyes. And after a bit of time, I felt like my body was no longer resting on my bed, but I was floating. And the room was still around me, the walls, I could sense the walls and the bed beneath me, but I was lifted up. And then I saw just, words can't really describe, like this, close as I can come to it, is this incredibly beautiful sky with these fireflies kind of flashing about. And beyond the physical beauty of it was the oversense and overwhelming sense of love. It was almost too much to bear. It was all around and in me and around me. And it was spectacular and terrifying at the same time. Mike died in 2002, and I've had a lot of years to reflect on that experience. And sometimes I think the mind is so wonderful to help us heal and to get us through what we need to do that it takes us places. And then there's times where I say, that was so much more. And I can tell you, since that experience, I've never asked to be taken where Mike has been taken. I feel he kept his part of the bargain, and there's only so many of those encounters I can handle in this lifetime. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us for another episode of the Howl Podcast. Come back next week for more stories, and don't forget you can listen to our entire back catalog at ncpr.org/howl. The show is written, produced, and edited by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. David Summerstein is my script supervisor. Doyle Dean is the production manager at NCPR. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, and Bill Hanel is our director of digital services. You can get even more stories when you subscribe to the Howl newsletter, delivered directly to your email inbox every Wednesday afternoon. Sign up there at ncpr.org/subscribe. And if you like the show, throw us a couple bucks and help keep us going. You can make a donation at ncpr.org/give. By the way, our theme music is by Famous Letter Writer of Plattsburgh. Find more of their music and dozens of other North Country musicians by visiting our website. See you next week for North Country Public Radio. I'm Ethan Shanty. This is The Howl.